It was just another Tuesday. A white teenage boy named Josh Miller boarded a flight from Salt Lake City to Denver. Seat 18A. A window seat. Nothing special. No red flags. No threats. Just a 17-year-old with his backpack, his earbuds, and a phone full of music and text threads. But within 5 minutes of a simple phone call made by a flight attendant, the entire financial system of the United States hiccuped. A phone call. 5 minutes. And $2.3 billion in assets across the country frozen. Not just crypto wallets. Not just tech startups. Hospitals. Schools. Government contractors. All stalled. Because of him. Or rather, because of what someone thought he might be. Let me take you back to the exact moment that flipped the nation into digital lockdown. Let me tell you about how a misunderstanding, a look, a suspicion, turned one teen solo flight into a national headline. Josh Miller wasn't a criminal. He wasn't a hacker. He wasn't even particularly good with computers. He was a high school senior. On a roll. Band geek. A kid with ADHD who fidgeted too much and got nervous in new places. That day, he was flying alone to visit his mother in Denver. She had recently moved out after the divorce, trying to start over. Josh hadn't flown alone before. He didn't know the unspoken rules. Keep your phone low. Don't tap too much. Don't look over your shoulder while texting, especially not if you look like you're hiding something. And he definitely didn't know that behind him, in seat 19C, a flight attendant had been watching his every move. She saw him looking down, rapidly typing, and occasionally glancing toward the aisle. To her, that was enough. "We might have a suspicious passenger," she reportedly said to the captain. "White male, teenager, hoodie, seated near the back. Acting jittery. Guarding his phone like it's classified. I don't like it." The captain didn't argue. He had protocols. He called ground control. Security was notified. Denver PD was informed. Customs and Border Protection was copied. Just standard escalation. But one piece of data changed everything. Josh's phone pinged a public proxy server based in Estonia. That server had been used in multiple cyber crimes under investigation. And 5 minutes after that call, the switch was flipped. Here's what most Americans didn't know. The U.S. government had quietly deployed a network of autonomous digital defense protocols under Project Gideon, Global Infrastructure Defense for Emergency Override Networks. It had one job. If a cyber attack was detected, it could halt digital assets nationwide within seconds to prevent a financial collapse. It wasn't meant to be triggered lightly. But the server Josh's phone pinged? That server had been red flagged for weeks as a launch point for international crypto laundering. And because Josh's phone had just connected to it, unknowingly, automatically through a mobile game app he downloaded that morning. Gideon initiated Phase 1 lockdown. First, 37 digital wallets were frozen. Then, 12 blockchain exchanges. By the time Josh's flight touched down in Denver, major systems were offline across 3 time zones. Hospitals couldn't pay suppliers. Small business payrolls bounced. Millions of dollars disappeared from public view. The news hadn't broken yet. But the silence had begun. At Denver International, Josh was the last to leave the plane. 2 plainclothes officers stood at the gate. He smiled at them nervously. He always looked anxious. They asked to see his phone. Josh hesitated. That hesitation cost him everything. Within moments, TSA joined. A cybersecurity response team was contacted. His phone was seized. Josh was detained in a cold white room with a flickering light and no one explaining why. He kept asking, "Am I in trouble? What did I do? I was just playing a game." But no one answered. Not really. Because they didn't know either. In New York, the CFO of a fintech firm checked his dashboard. Their main liquidity wallet, frozen. In Los Angeles, a crypto investor's assets vanished. In Houston, a hospital's digital records locked behind a firewall. All traced back to one IP node, connected to one Estonian proxy, accessed by one teenager on a plane. The public didn't find out for 12 more hours. But behind the scenes? Chaos. Panic. People started calling it the Digital Pearl Harbor. All because of a kid, a hoodie, a phone. Was it justified? Was it profiling? Was it just a freak tech incident? The truth was messy. Josh wasn't a hacker. But someone on that server was. And that someone had used Josh's same mobile game as a delivery mechanism for a data beacon. Josh didn't know it. But his phone was a carrier. Not of a virus. Of suspicion. And that was enough. When the story finally broke, the hashtags exploded. Hashtag Free Josh. Hashtag CryptoKid. Hashtag Flight 18A. Hashtag Digital Lockdown. Some called him a hero. Some called him a threat. But most people just wanted to know. How the hell did this happen? Josh cried himself to sleep that night in a government detainment facility. He wasn't arrested, just held for questioning. But no lawyer. No phone. No food for hours. Just the echoes of what he'd heard one agent mutter behind a locked door. This kid might have just triggered the biggest freeze in U.S. financial history. Josh didn't know what to think. All he could say was, "I swear, I just wanted to see my mom." That's just the beginning. What happened over the next 72 hours shook the foundations of trust in every American institution, from airlines to law enforcement to crypto to AI surveillance. What Josh didn't know was that his story wasn't really about him anymore. It was about what the world sees when it looks at a scared kid in a hoodie with a phone. Keep watching. Because this isn't just about one flight. It's about every system you trust. And how close it came to collapsing because of one call. Before we dive deeper, we need to understand who Josh Miller really is. Because if you ask his teachers, his friends, even his parents, they'll all tell you the same thing. He was just a kid. Not a prodigy. Not a rebel. Just a 17-year-old trying to keep his life from falling apart. His parents had split the previous year. The divorce wasn't messy, but it left cracks in everything. In trust, in school performance, in the kind of confidence kids fake in front of the world. He lived in Ogden, Utah, a quiet suburb where people don't expect federal agents to knock on their doors. His dad, David Miller, worked as a small business accountant. A cautious, by-the-book kind of man. His mother, Elena, had just taken a job in Denver at a startup working on decentralized internet protocols. Ironic, considering how much centralization was about to invade their lives. That morning, Josh packed light. A phone. A hoodie. A worn-out backpack. He didn't even check a bag. He downloaded a few games to keep busy on the flight. One of them, a new puzzle app, offered crypto rewards for completing levels. Sounded fun. He didn't know that app had ties to a series of anonymized servers used by darknet actors across Eastern Europe. He didn't know the Estonian proxy node it connected to was on a watch list. He didn't know that Gideon, the government's secret defense algorithm, had flagged that node as a level 3 digital threat. And he definitely didn't know that opening that app at 34,000 feet, while his phone used in-flight Wi-Fi, would make him the tip of a cyberwar iceberg. Let's pause and look at the machine behind the madness. Project Gideon wasn't evil. It wasn't even reckless. It was built by brilliant people, people who remembered 9/11 and lived through the 2008 financial crash. People who wanted to protect Americans from threats they couldn't see coming. Gideon was designed to skim patterns, not people. Data, not race. Behavior, not names. But like any system built on code, it lacked one thing: nuance. So when Josh's phone connected to a node that had previously carried ransomware payloads, Gideon did what it was built to do. It triggered a Phase 1 asset freeze on any digital stream touching the node within the last 48 hours, regardless of intent. That included wallets from tech founders, seed investors, even a federal grant program that unknowingly routed through the same node via a contractor. In a matter of minutes, $2.3 billion in assets were under a digital lock and key. Back in Ogden, David Miller got the call every parent dreads, but with a twist. It wasn't police. It wasn't a hospital. It was a Department of Cybersecurity liaison asking, "Do you know where your son is right now? What kind of apps does he use?" David thought it was a scam, until agents showed up at his office door. Meanwhile in Denver, Elena Miller was waiting at the arrivals gate with a handmade sign and Josh's favorite lemon Snapple. He never walked out. Instead, she got a phone call from a restricted number. "Ms. Miller, your son is in custody. He's not under arrest. We just need to talk to him." No explanation. No comfort. Just bureaucracy cloaked in panic. What most people still don't realize is how interconnected everything has become. When Gideon froze $2.3 billion, it wasn't just crypto exchanges. It was payroll processors for public school districts, third-party billing systems for hospitals, micro-investment apps used by millions of young people, pension fund gateways, even parking meters in 2 major cities. The average American didn't feel it yet. But for hundreds of CEOs, CTOs, and startup founders, it felt like someone had pulled the plug on reality. All because a kid tried to beat level 9 on a crypto puzzle app at cruising altitude. The press didn't get the story until 14 hours later. But when they did, all hell broke loose. The headlines were instant clickbait. Crypto kid sparks national financial lockdown. Flight 18, a passenger triggers cybersecurity nightmare. White teen mistaken for hacker. Was it profiling or protocol? And just like that, Josh wasn't just a kid on a flight. He was a lightning rod. For every debate about surveillance, every frustration about government overreach, every parent's fear, every teen's nightmare. By the time Josh's name was whispered in government hallways, he was already sitting alone in a holding room at the Denver airport. No cuffs. No Miranda rights. Just a chair, a white wall, and 2 people who wouldn't tell him who they worked for. To Josh, it felt like a bad prank until they took his phone. One agent placed it in a sealed silver pouch. The other typed rapidly into a laptop, cross-referencing metadata, hash history, and server paths. "Do you know where this app came from?" they asked. Josh just shrugged. "App Store, I guess." That answer, a truthful, clueless shrug, would become part of the evidence log later, under a category labeled anomaly, low intent. But it was already too late. At 5:52 p.m. Eastern, the First Bank system flagged a failed transaction in Boston. By 6:04, a multi-chain token transfer scheduled by a hedge fund's AI assistant failed to confirm, 3 times in a row. By 6:18, internal Slack messages in fintech startups across New York, Austin, and Miami began pinging in chaos. "Is this us? Anyone else getting wallet lock warnings? Did we just get hacked?" But it wasn't a hack. It was a containment protocol, and it was working exactly as designed. And yet, no one knew who had triggered it. Not the banks. Not the tech firms. Not the journalists who'd soon break the story. Only one agency had the full picture, and they weren't talking. Not yet. Josh's name wasn't public. But inside a secure building in Virginia, it was on a whiteboard under a single, chilling label. "Origin contact, Tier 3 breach." He had become the digital equivalent of Patient Zero. Not a villain. Not a hacker. Just the first thread in a knitted sweater of chaos. And chaos was exactly what was unfolding across the country. A school district in California couldn't access payroll. A rural hospital in Montana missed its medical equipment shipment due to frozen processing IDs. A mother in Detroit couldn't refill her child's epilepsy medication because her pharmacy's billing software couldn't verify insurance. No one blamed Josh yet. They didn't even know he existed. But the cracks were spider-webbing across the surface. Meanwhile, media outlets were sniffing blood. Leaks started trickling out of government staffers' private group chats. Tweets with half-truths. Screenshots out of context. Reddit threads going viral. It all added up to something frightening. A white teenager on a flight might have just triggered the largest coordinated financial freeze in U.S. history. The country didn't know what to believe, but fear doesn't wait for facts. At home, Josh's friends were getting calls. Reporters staked out Elena's apartment in Denver, yelling through the intercom for comments. David's employer quietly put him on administrative leave. They didn't know what he'd done wrong. They didn't even believe he had done something wrong. But reputations move slower than headlines, and the headlines were sprinting. Inside the government, the storm was even worse. One side argued, shut it all down. Wipe the logs. Blame it on a cyber test. The other side said, use this as proof we need tighter data laws. Strike while the fear is fresh. In the middle, a 17-year-old with no clue the full weight of global finance was pressing on his shoulders. A private meeting was called. 2 senators. 1 national security advisor. 3 private sector tech liaisons. Topic: how do we walk this back without igniting the internet? The irony? The room had no idea that the internet was already on fire. Over the next 6 hours, hashtags began trending. Hashtag CryptoFreeze. Hashtag PuzzleAppPanic. Hashtag WhiteKidHack. TikTok theories emerged, some calling Josh a genius anarchist, others a government plant. On one live stream, a cybersecurity influencer with 2.4 million followers claimed, "This wasn't an accident. This was a drill. And we're the rats." Truth had left the station. Still, no one had heard from Josh. No footage. No statement. Just rumors. Until 36 hours later, when a video leaked. Grainy's security cam. Timestamp from the Denver airport. A teen confused. Surrounded. Compliant. No aggression. No shouting. Just a scared kid handing over a phone. The internet paused. And for the first time, the question shifted from, "What did he do?" to, "Why are they treating him like a threat?" The leaked airport footage changed everything. Before, Josh was a phantom, a name without a face, a story without a source. Now he was real. Young. Harmless. Terrified. The internet had been promised a hacker. A digital terrorist. What they got was a skinny teen with messy hair and a cracked phone screen. Public opinion flipped. And fast. Journalists started asking better questions. If this was a mistake, why isn't anyone apologizing? If he's not charged, why is he still being held? If this was an accident, why aren't we looking at the system that caused it? But the truth was, no one in power wanted the system questioned, because Project Gideon had been their ace for years. A silent shield. A firewall between everyday chaos and another 9/11. It had stopped cyber attacks, foreign interference, ransomware rings, all without ever being revealed to the public. Until now. And all it took to blow it wide open was a teenager playing a game at 30,000 feet. Meanwhile, Josh was moved to a federal debrief site in Colorado Springs. No charges, no legal counsel, just protective custody. The room had no windows. Every hour, he was asked the same questions. Did anyone tell you to download the app? Did you know it was connected to a foreign node? Have you had any contact with crypto influencers, anonymous forums, or non-US platforms? Every hour, his answer stayed the same. No. I just downloaded a game. The Gideon team couldn't believe it. They reran his phone data through 5 different AI vetting layers. No signs of collusion. No foreign chats. Not even a VPN. In fact, the only suspicious activity on his device was a series of failed math quizzes in a tutoring app and a playlist labeled Sad Trap Vibes 4 a.m. But here's where the story begins to shift from surveillance to survival. Because outside the holding room, the country was unraveling. Small businesses couldn't process payroll. Investment accounts showed under review. Government agencies were locked out of their own blockchain-based record-keeping. And the public, the people, were pissed. Not just at the freeze, but at the silence. Then came the first televised protest. In Portland, a group of students and tech workers gathered downtown with a single clear sign. Let the kid go! By the next morning, it had spread to 5 cities. Then 20. Then global. In Berlin, we are all Josh. In Seoul, digital prisoner number 001. In Buenos Aires, if one app can ruin the system, fix the system, not the kid. It wasn't just a trending story anymore. It was a movement. Parents saw their own kids in Josh. Teens saw themselves vulnerable to forces too big to fight. Old-school activists saw a mirror of past injustice dressed in digital skin. And the government? They saw a wildfire. Behind closed doors, a high-level White House task force convened. Topic: de-escalate public reaction. Protect operational secrecy. Maintain economic control. But one advisor broke script. He stood up and said, maybe the problem isn't the leak. Maybe the problem is that we built something this powerful and expected it to never fail. Silence filled the room. No one responded, because deep down, they knew he was right. Meanwhile, Josh had been in federal custody for 3 days. Still no lawyer. Still no public statement. But something unexpected happened. One of the agents watching his interviews, a younger analyst, slipped a file to a reporter. Anonymously. Inside the file? Transcripts. Audio clips. Internal memos proving Josh was never considered a threat, not after hour 1. But the system couldn't reverse itself without exposing its own flaws. So they kept him in, not for protection, not for prosecution, but for containment. That leak lit the match. News networks went all in. Exclusive interviews with Josh's childhood teachers. Clips from his YouTube channel reviewing gadgets. Testimonials from classmates who said he hated math but loved puzzles. The public saw a full picture now. Not a criminal. Just a curious kid. A kid who happened to stumble into a weaponized algorithm designed to make no mistakes. On day 4, something cracked. A federal judge in Denver filed a demand for Josh's immediate release or formal charges. It made national headlines. The Department of Justice released a carefully worded statement. The individual in question is not under arrest and is cooperating voluntarily. But legal experts pushed back instantly. Voluntary cooperation doesn't require locked rooms and lawyerless interviews. That evening, Elena Miller, Josh's mom, went live on a major news network. She was composed, but her voice cracked only once. He's just a kid, she said, and he deserves to come home. That clip was seen over 84 million times in 2 days. The next morning, Josh was released. Quietly. No cameras. No press. Just a black SUV that dropped him off 2 blocks from his mom's building. He didn't speak to reporters. He didn't post online. He just hugged his mom and slept for 19 hours straight. For most people, the story would have ended there. Kid gets caught in a storm. Released. Goes silent. The system moves on. But not this time. Because while Josh tried to return to normal life, the world had already decided he was more than a headline. He was a symbol. A scapegoat. And for some, a savior. Within 72 hours of his release, 3 different civil rights organizations filed motions demanding a federal investigation into Gideon and the digital detainment of American citizens. A class action lawsuit followed, representing over 60 companies affected by the freeze. And then, the dominoes started to fall. Congress called an emergency oversight hearing. Senators from both parties grilled intelligence leaders. Who gave this system the power to freeze assets without human oversight? Where is the warrant? Where is the transparency? What safeguards were bypassed that led to a minor being treated like a cyber criminal? The answers were rehearsed, cold, sanitized. We acted in accordance with Section 84B under the Digital Emergency Act. The subject's device initiated communication with a restricted node. Intent is irrelevant under protocol. Only connection. But the public wasn't buying it anymore. Josh's name was now known by every household in America. He hadn't spoken a word to the media, not a tweet, not a TikTok, not a single interview. But his silence made the noise louder. People projected their fears, hopes, and outrage onto him. Memes, documentaries, protest songs, all centered around a boy who couldn't understand why opening a game made him the eye of a digital hurricane. Then came the biggest break yet. A whistleblower, former NSA contractor turned privacy activist, released a 214-page dossier. Code logs, chat histories, development records. Inside, buried deep in test reports, one line changed everything. Puzzle chain beta sourced via external contract. Titan Vault/node path KX13/developer PA. 3 letters. That's all it took. PA, Preston Arlo. If the name sounds familiar, it's because Preston Arlo was once Silicon Valley's golden boy. Founder of Coinzage, the first crypto app ever featured during a Super Bowl ad. Later blacklisted for privacy violations and quietly investigated by the SEC. Turns out, he didn't just disappear. He took his talents underground, into shadow tech. Dark contracts. Ghost-coded tools for governments that didn't want fingerprints. Puzzle Chain, the game Josh downloaded, wasn't built for kids. It wasn't built for fun. It was a behavioral mapping engine disguised as entertainment. A data siphon meant to test user response patterns, decision trees, risk calibration. Why? Because Arlo was training a market prediction AI, and he needed natural players to feed it. Thousands of them. Josh? Just one of the many who downloaded it. But the only one who triggered a flagged server through in-flight Wi-Fi. The reveal hit the internet like a bomb. Josh didn't break the system, he revealed the system. The real enemy wasn't a teen, it was unchecked digital power. Puzzle Chain was never a puzzle. It was a trap. Public sentiment exploded. Late-night shows tore into federal overreach. Congressional approval ratings dropped to record lows. Arlo went into hiding. And for the first time in modern history, legislation was drafted on live stream, with public comment open to all. The Digital Rights Reform Act. A 91-page proposal to limit the power of autonomous cybersecurity systems, mandate legal access for detained minors, and establish a Bill of Rights for digital citizens. Josh's name appeared nowhere in the document, but it was everywhere between the lines. And what about Josh? He still didn't speak. Not until 1 month later, when he walked on stage at a youth tech conference in Boulder, Colorado. Dressed in black. Hair longer. A little older, a lot quieter. He looked into the crowd, paused, and said, "I don't know how to explain what happened to me, but I know it shouldn't happen to anyone else." The audience stood before he could finish the sentence. The world had watched Josh go from a frightened teenager to an unlikely public figure. But behind the scenes, the battle was far from over. Government agencies scrambled to contain the fallout. Contractors were fired. Internal investigations launched. Yet, for many inside, the question remained: how did one flight attendant's call spiral into a nationwide freeze of $2.3 billion in assets? The flight attendant, Elena Miller, had become a lightning rod of controversy. Some saw her as a hero, acting on instinct to alert authorities about a suspicious passenger. Others saw her as the catalyst for an overreach that upended countless lives. What no one knew was why she made that call. Elena's story was complicated. She had been trained in a top-secret TSA program designed to identify potential cyber threats disguised as everyday passengers. A program born from the ashes of the 2016 election interference scandals, quietly implemented in select airlines. On that flight, she noticed Josh's app glowing strangely on his screen during takeoff. A routine check in her mind turned into a phone call she couldn't ignore. Her call activated protocols tied directly to Project Gideon. In just 5 minutes, $2.3 billion was frozen across financial networks nationwide, a digital lockdown designed to stop cyber attacks in their tracks. But the system had no human override at that critical moment. It was all automated. This chain reaction exposed a stark truth. The safeguards meant to protect the country had been built without accountability. And when the system overreacted, a boy became the face of its failure. Meanwhile, Josh grappled with the weight of unintended consequences. He had never asked to be the center of a national security crisis. Yet his actions, or lack thereof, had sparked a movement calling for change. His silence was a shield, but also a burden. Months passed. Josh returned to school. Slowly, his voice returned. Through interviews, podcasts, and panels, he shared his story. Not as a hacker, not as a villain, but as a reminder that technology, no matter how advanced, must always serve people, not imprison them. The Digital Rights Reform Act passed with overwhelming bipartisan support. New laws mandated transparency for cybersecurity systems, protections for minors caught in digital investigations, limits on autonomous decision-making by AI in critical infrastructure. And for the first time, the flight attendant's call was understood not just as a trigger, but as a symptom of a world rushing to defend itself, sometimes at the cost of its own citizens' freedoms. Josh's story became a cautionary tale, a story of power, fear, and the thin line between security and liberty. But most importantly, a story about a kid caught in the wrong place, with the wrong game, at the wrong time. Imagine boarding a flight, your mind swirling with plans, worries, and that familiar buzz of technology all around you. For one teenager named Josh, it was just another trip, headphones in, phone out, scrolling through a new game app. But what started as a simple download would spiral into something no one could have predicted. A call made by a vigilant flight attendant. A sudden involvement of law enforcement. And within minutes, a financial system freeze impacting billions. The world would soon know Josh's name. But not for what he did, for what happened to him. This is a story about fear, technology, and the consequences of decisions made in seconds. It's about the fragile line between security and overreach. And it's about a kid caught in the middle. Today, we unravel the unbelievable chain of events that began 30,000 feet above the ground and rippled across the nation. From a confused teenager to the center of a cybersecurity storm. From a silent government project to a nationwide debate on digital rights. And from one phone call to billions of dollars frozen. Buckle up. Because this story isn't just about a flight attendant or a white teen. It's about us all. What started as a simple phone call from a flight attendant became a flashpoint for an entire nation. A teenager's curiosity collided with a system designed to protect, but also to control. Josh's story reminds us that behind every algorithm, every protocol, there are real people. People who can be caught in the crossfire of security measures meant to keep us safe. People whose lives can be upended in a moment, without warning, without explanation. And the question we must ask ourselves is, how do we balance safety with freedom? How do we ensure technology serves humanity, not the other way around? The digital age offers incredible power, but also unprecedented risk. The key is accountability, transparency, and compassion. Josh's ordeal was a wake-up call. A reminder that systems must be built with care, and never at the expense of the innocent. The flight attendant's call wasn't just about suspicion. It was about vigilance and responsibility. But it also revealed how easily that vigilance can spiral out of control when safeguards fail. Today, Josh stands not as a victim, but as a symbol of resilience, of hope, and of the need for change. His story touches the young who face a digital world full of unknowns. It resonates with the older generations who remember times when trust was simpler and systems were less opaque. And it speaks to all of us, because in this interconnected world, none of us are truly separate. So as we close this chapter, remember, behind every headline, there is a human story. Behind every call, a choice. And behind every system, a responsibility to protect not just data, but dignity. This is the story of a flight attendant, a white teen, and $2.3 billion frozen. But more than that, it's a story about us all.